In the meantime, these are interesting times, obviously, across the Irish Sea, and football not exempt. Sean Ingle of The Guardian is with us, always a very welcome guest. Sean, great to have you on.
Lovely to be here.
So the Premier League, I know you were covering this story across the afternoon for The Guardian. The Premier League have released a statement now just to clarify what's happening at the weekend.
Yeah, so I guess as expected, really, the Man United Leeds game and the Chelsea-Liverpool match are both postponed. I was speaking to a few people this morning that thought it would be worse than that, and that a number of Football League games would also be off. But this evening, when I spoke to a few people around the Football League, they thought most of the games would go ahead. So actually, although there's a few games missing, it's not as bad as we perhaps thought a day or two ago.
Chelsea-Liverpool, I suppose, makes sense at a logistical level. It's the 4:30 kick-off in London on the Sunday. Why Manchester United Leeds at Old Trafford on the Sunday?
Well, you know the history of Manchester United Leeds. It's often it kicks off. I guess the second reason is that they don't quite know how many people are going to show up for this Queen's Vigil, and then the Lying in State from Wednesday in London. And I was chatting to someone in government earlier, and they were suggesting there could well end up being quite a number of police from the other major cities called down to London to help out. And if you've got a major game at Old Trafford, Leeds and Man United don't like each other. There could be an issue with policing there. So that's the reason, really.
Yeah, I was reading in one piece that when she's lying in state, the queues to, I guess, shuffle by could be up to 20 hours. People are going to queue in line for 20 hours, which is just hard to fathom.
It really is. I read the same report, but then we're in a country where people, I think it was at Morrison's, the supermarket it's turned off its beeps at the supermarket checkout for because of the Queen's death, and so we're not in Kansas anymore, Dorothy. It's a very different place at the moment.
Wow, I hadn't heard that. For the full 10 days, or just Thursday, or who knows, but good on Morrison's. Brighton and Crystal Palace remains postponed. That was due to a rail strike, which is now off, but they're leaving that game off. And then for anyone interested, Brentford, Arsenal on the Sunday, that moves to midday, and Everton West Ham, which is on in Liverpool, is a 2:15 kickoff. It does mean that none of United... Manchester United, that is. None of United, Chelsea, Liverpool, Leeds, Brighton or Crystal Palace will play a Premier League game for a month, which is quite something as well. That brings us, I suppose, to the decision to cancel games the weekend just gone.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, we already have this incredibly packed schedule because of the November and December World Cup. And most teams in Europe are playing midweek and weekends from now till the World Cup and then after. I thought it was a very strange decision. I spoke to senior people in other sports who were nervous about the blowback if they went ahead, but decided on balance it was the right thing to do. I think football wanted to be seen to be doing the right thing, and in doing so, it ended up making the wrong decision. When the people I spoke to in various, FA, Premier League, and Football League, all sort of made similar points, and the main one for them was cricket and horse racing and rugby had all had a sort of a day of mourning. So and golf as well. They'd taken the Friday off, while football hadn't had the chance. Deep down, I think that's really a smokescreen. I think they were panicked about tabloid headlines if they went ahead, and there was booing in the crowd or wherever else. And I think they decided that to play it safe, but it was a strange decision, and particularly for the grassroots, all levels of football to be cancelled too.
Yeah, well, the grassroots thing was quite extraordinary. One explanation I read, I think it was in Miguel Delaney's piece, and he was saying that the Premier League meeting was only maybe 20 minutes long, and what was to the forefront of their thinking was that not just Prince William, but the Queen also is a patron of the FA, and so our sport, our patron, therefore we really can't be seen to play at the weekend. Now, I don't know to what extent you buy that one, or is that also a bit of a smokescreen?
No, that's certainly true. I spoke to three sources. There were a meeting between the DCMS, the government department, and the various sports, and they all mentioned that football, and they mentioned various names, and you could probably guess some of them, were sort of very much stressing we can't go ahead. It's our national game. I was told that Prince William and the Queen were mentioned in those meetings, and others from different sports were sort of thought, hang on a second. The Queen's always had that sort of image of let's carry on. She carried on through the Blitz and all those other things. They didn't really buy it, but that was certainly what football was saying privately to other sports when they met government on Friday morning.
Yeah. I mean, my instinct on the Thursday evening after the announcement was that Premier League games would go, but also that, like, so would rugby, so would cricket, so would potentially Wentworth, that everything would go. But once it became apparent that other sports were going to continue on with that Friday of morning, which wasn't available to football, granted, but football would say, well, okay, if this is the general accepted protocol across the board, then let's just go along with it. So I was amazed when the other sports continued that they didn't say, well, there's safety in numbers here. We're not doing anything untoward.
No, I agree. They would have been briefed on the government guidance on the Thursday night, and that was sort of reiterated in another meeting on the Friday morning. And they weren't told of it beforehand, this idea that you can carry on because government didn't want it to leak while the Queen was still alive. So in fairness to sports, they did get this fairly late on a Friday after the Queen's death, and they had to make fairly quick decisions. There was a meeting of sports just before the Queen's death was announced. There was another one after on the Thursday. Then there was another one on the Friday morning. And again, speaking to people in the room, it was fairly clear that most sports wanted to go ahead. So there was safety in numbers. A couple of them wobbled after football made its decision, but they decided to carry on. And I think they were vindicated. I've seen no reports of trouble. National anthems were sung at games. There were minutes silence. And I don't know. I think you're looking and think, football got it wrong.
Yeah. So to what extent do you think it does speak of a certain sense that football has of itself, that it doesn't take much for it to be heavily criticised, and it just has a certain place in the class system, and like that the more establishment sports, the more middle class sports continued, and even during COVID, somehow so much of COVID and sport became about criticising the Premier League and Premier League footballers. It just for all the its central place in English life, it showed a certain lack of confidence in itself, or just maybe spoke of the extent to which it's so used to being vilified or criticised in the media.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. I think there's sort of the two angles here, really. There's the one, the fear of the tabloids, but I also think there is that understandable fear that something could kick off. You can imagine the headlines, I guess, on a Saturday night if there'd been hooliganism, or there had been some chants or whatever else, and that had led the front page of the Sunday tabloids. So it's strange, isn't it, that football is by far the most dominant sport in the UK, by far the richest sport. It towers over every other sport, and yet at this moment when it had to make a difficult decision, when it had to you'd think it would have stuck its chest out and be brave, it sort of was very, very timid indeed.
So the Arsenal PSV game, the Europa League game on Thursday, is gone as well. I must say I didn't realise PSV fans had a reputation, but there's security concerns there. That's the primary reason that one's gone.
Yeah. I was speaking to people at UEFA this morning, and when the things were still in doubt, and they were saying, it was the two things. It was worried about policing, but also it was a higher risk or a higher safety concern type of game because of the PSV fans. So I think they just decided to play it safe. But again, Arsenal now are going to have to probably rearrange either their game against Manchester City in mid-October, or a Carabao Cup tie against Brighton, I think, in early November.
Okay.
So that they now have 3 games to make up till the end of the season, and there aren't that many slots. It's going to be a strange, truncated season, and it wouldn't surprise you if there are going to be a bunch of injuries after the World Cup, and just with players having to go every 3 days or so.
As an aside, for the European matches which do go ahead, I saw that the Champions League theme song won't be played, and this kind of cleared something up for me, because I guess like everybody, and we're all watching the coverage over the last couple of days, and the coronation has been replayed, and like several times I've just thought, am I dreaming here, or are they playing the Champions League theme song at the Queen's coronation? And Zadok the priest is what it's loosely but very recognisably based on the Champions League music. So there are going to be a bunch of people for I would think King Charles III's coronation going, geez, they're playing the Champions League music here.
That's news on me. I tend to follow the sport closely and speak to a lot of people in sport, but that one missed me
And there
by.
you
So I've
go.
learned something. Thank you very much for that.
Well, when you're watching replays over the next couple of days of the Queen's coronation, you will hear basically the Champions League music being blared out at a certain point, and so they're not going to play the Champions League music at the European Games tomorrow. Liverpool are one of the teams in action tomorrow against Ajax, and we've seen much, I suppose, quote-unquote controversy over fans and the national anthem, Liverpool fans and the national anthem. Jurgen Klopp spoke today, and he said of the minute silence, and it is going to be silence as opposed to applause, I think it's the right thing to do. I don't think our people, because he was asked, will Liverpool fans interrupt the silence? I don't think our people need any kind of advice from me for showing respect. There are plenty of examples where people showed exactly the right respect. One which surprised me, and I was really proud of that moment, was last season when we played Manchester United around a very sad situation with Cristiano Ronaldo's family. And that is what I expect. For me, it is clear that's what we have to do, and that's it. And again, there may be other captains who've done similar, so I apologise if I've missed them, but I did see certainly Niamh Fahey, the Liverpool captain, and Jordan Henderson, also captain, and this is Henderson the day before a big game, very public showing of signing the book of condolences and all dressed in black, and very much highlighting that moment to presumably Liverpool fans in the main. So what is the expectation? You'd have better feel for this than me. I don't think they're like it's a bastion of monarchists, but will this minute silence be in significant danger?
Who knows? I mean, I'm thinking back to the FA Cup final earlier this year, and they Liverpool fans booed "Abide with Me" and "God Save the Queen." So I guess there may be a few, but with all these things, I suspect, if they're 40,000 Liverpool fans, if there's one or two or three or four or even 100 that boo, I mean, it's still a very small minority, and I'm sure some papers will jump on it, but I think most football fans most of the time are pretty well behaved, and if there's a few that perhaps don't follow the necessary decorum, I don't think we should make a huge song and dance about it, unless it's obviously if the whole stadium is going crazy, then it clearly will be a big story. But I think you can always expect one or two to go against the grain in most of these things, to be honest.
Yeah. Oh, and maybe that was the thinking over the weekend cancellation just gone, that actually in the immediacy when it's at maybe its rawest, let's cancel these games now, because invariably it's very hard to control that many thousand people across that many minute silences and becomes headlines for the game.
Sure, but I think that's right. But at the same time, often, the second, I think it's the second Sunday in November, there's obviously there's a moment of silence to remember the fallen, and yes, there'll always be one or two that will shout out and a couple that might boo or sing at inappropriate moments. But I mean, you can't hold the sins of a handful, to the whole audience. So, but yeah, I think that's probably a fair point. But the same thing could happen this weekend, so it doesn't quite hold.
Yes, you can't put it off forever. Sean Ingle of The Guardian, thank you so much for bringing us up to speed on where the Premier League are. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Sean Ingle with us there. So there you go. 7 of the 10 Premier League fixtures proceed. Brighton Crystal Palace remains off. Manchester United, Leeds at Old Trafford, and Chelsea, Liverpool and Stamford Bridge are postponed. Football on Off the Ball is brought to you by Sky. Watch every live Premier League game this season on Sky Sports, BT Sport and Premier Sports.